in Spain, PhD in Sociology of Culture and Arts. And you have more than 30 years of experience in healthcare quality research. It's social policy evaluation of European countries.
Yes.
And I think your presentation has the point of that are all things from me. And it's in the black.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much to the team, to the Amsterdam School of Law, and thank you so much for everybody there that is online connected. Well, the title of my presentation is Visualizing Social Mobility. For those who are not that familiar with intergenerational social class mobility studies, they are basically addressing how is people's social class compares to that of their parents. So when we study social mobility, what we want to see basically is how individuals of a given generation move up, down, or stays at the same social class as their parents. So we're comparing that movements in social class structures from one generation to another, at the same time comparing with their parents. So when I said enhancing comprehensions using information visualizations, is that I don't only want people to understand better this social mobility. I want them to get a sense of the importance of it, and also raise some awareness and curiosity for the phenomenon. So we're going to start with some background about information visualization and data visualization. Then we're going to move to the two case studies that I'm working on with this STRAT-ART initiative. Then briefly some future steps that I'm thinking about and the expected income impact of the project. So let's move on with the background. First, we thought about one problem that social mobility studies have, which is the high complexity. And it makes it very difficult to explain to the general public, but also to specialized scholars within the social science discipline. So those tools that we have to compare one generation to another, such as, for instance, constant flux. Constant social flux basically assumes that the underlying association between social origins and social destinations, responders to social class compared to their parents, remains the same across time. So there's no big changes from one generation to another in the way that association is created. Then we have another more complicated tools that we use to study this kind of social mobility tables that are, for example, UNIDIF. It's also known as, if I say right, it's log multiplicative layer effect model, which basically what does is they add another complexity layer to the constant flux, and it allows to the result to be more flexible. So from one generation to another, the level of association between parents and sons and daughters is a little bit lower. So these kind of indicators are less known than other inequality measures, such as Gini coefficient. So many scholars know about it. So it creates less awareness about this important topic, which is social mobility. So that can lead to failing policies that are addressing inequality of opportunities, such as educational inequalities, and also can lead to some political consequences because people don't have evidence-based information about this topic. So how we want to address this? As West et al. Mentioned, we need to find new ways of seeing and new ways of knowing with information visualization. So the first general objective is going to be to overcome the broken social elevator metaphor that many of us has heard in many media, that social elevator is broken, there's no more upward social mobility, blah, 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 because we think that it doesn't accurately describe the whole multidimensional complexity of social mobility. We want also to contribute to the dissemination, exploitation, and communication plan of the INCASI project, not only through journal publications, but through other mediums. And we want to use aesthetic information visualizations, proof of concepts, using social mobility data to achieve those goals. So basically, I'm giving some theoretical framework about information visualization. We can conceptualize information visualization as the creation and analysis of visual representation of information that many scholars have said that they are as old as humanity. Recently, we have found what is described as the visualization, the oldest visualization of a human narrative ever registered in a cave in Indonesia is 51,000 years old, which is blasting the last record of it. So we have used information visualization for thousands of years. The main objective of them, obviously, is to make viewers understand the information as effectively and as quickly as possible. But sometimes people want to make those data and information a little bit nice and pleasant and beautiful. I just jumped into this piece in the Rijksmuseum last week. It's called Lacquer Panel with the names of the chief actors of the Shina. Basically, it's a sheet with the information. I don't know if you guys know about this piece, but it's super interesting. It's basically a sheet, it's a spreadsheet. In columns, you have the year, the number of the Dutchman in charge of the commerce between Japan and Netherlands, and the number of ships that they sent to Netherlands from Japan, and the number of ships they lost in that way. The things about this piece is that it's made in one of the most expensive and rare woods, plus mother of pearl, plus leather. So they put a lot of time on a spreadsheet, not that we're doing right now with Excel. So they put a little bit of time. They wanted this information to last, and I find it pretty impressive. So we can assume that any information visualization has a function purpose and has an aesthetic purpose. We don't want to talk about art, and because we want to clarify the distinction between aesthetic and art here. Aesthetic, it's coming from the sensual perception theory, and it talks about how an artifact can evoke emotions in the viewer. While art is now recognized, nowadays it's recognized as a social practice where an artist with some intentions create an artifact, and that artifact is recognized as an artwork by social institutions, as Pierre Bourdieu says, like museums, like other collectors, other artists, gallerists, curators, and so on and so forth. So our approach to that is to turn information visualization in something aesthetic that can relate to the people and can evoke some emotions without maybe some sacrifice of the function of that information. Why? Because what we want to do is raise awareness and raise curiosity about the topic, not only informing about the data or the information, but just calling the attention of the people so they can just get informed through other ways. It's called the STRAT-ART approach. So people have been using data as an art material for aesthetic purpose for a long, long time. There are many examples. That data doesn't need to be quantitative, can be qualitative data. There are pieces like this one that they use the post of people in social media to create what is called a data portrait. So each of us with our social media information can have one of those data portraits. There are other examples that are more abstract. For instance, this piece by Richter and Nemec is called Ideal Solution. It's based on stock market data from Wall Street market. So they built a model with the data. I also want to highlight this piece that is made by 3 artists, but in collaboration with 5 Joint Research Center researchers all across Europe. Is in the exhibition Naturarchy. This is the Art and Science Initiative from the European Commission. They try to bring together data from researchers in the joint research centers all across Europe with some kind of secondments of artists going to those centers, like the CERN, and in Sevilla too, in the JRC in Sevilla, and many other places. So what they try to do is to merge scientific data with art initiatives. The exhibition is really nice. We can talk about this piece. So the last piece in my theoretical framework has to do with generative art. As defined by Ana Maria Caballero, refers to the rules-based system where art is some sort of like relinquish some form of control of the technology over the final output, despite designing its creation. So it's a human/machine creation, and it was discovered. It was previously named as machine art by a physicist working in his lab in the United States, Ben Lapowski, and he was working with a sine wave generator. And by serendipity, he just found how his machine could make these kind of beautiful abstract forms. So he published it in a scientific journal. This just as by serendipity art. He kept like researching on it. So he, to this sine wave generator, was adding colors or more input information. So generative art is quite old, and they have had many developments by many artists using technology and coding. As Ana Carreras is another really famous generative artist. I can talk about this piece. It's really cool. So, having that in mind, I would like to move to the first case study, which is STRAT-ART generative. And the objective of this initiative, of this, let's call it prototype, is to aesthetically visualize information on social mobility, in particularly social mobility rates, upward and downward social mobility rates, from 22 countries. And why we want to do that? Because we want to use it to raise interest, curiosity, and awareness towards the phenomenon. We're going to use data of the ISP surveys. I collaborated in this particular project with Pablo Dale, that is around. Thank you so much, Pablo, and Ildefonso Marquez. He's around here. Thank you both. And the instrument I'm going to use is the statistical art package with a little module of sine wave generator that we have. So how I proceed? Basically, I took the information that Pablo Dale and Ildefonso Marquez elaborated. This is basically telling us the percentage of people experiencing upward social mobility and the people of that country experiencing downward social mobility. So they're moving downward into the social ladder. As you can see, China is a little bit of an outlier because you have a lot of upward social mobility and very low downward social mobility. But I want you to focus maybe on Mexico, which is the last one. It has the lower vertical upward mobility and the higher, or one of the highest, downward social mobility, and also to Uruguay, who has the lower downward social mobility and higher social mobility. So the ratios of both of them are really different. So basically what we do is we created a function inserting sine and cosines, and it's a trigonometric function, so that's why we can create a sine wave. And we have added an exponential element to the trigonometric calculations to make it collapse very fast, so we can find more differences. And this is the thing, we have added some information of each country. So we can create a data portrait of each country using a sine wave generator. In this case, we have used 3 elements of the outward social mobility, the 29.5% multiplied by 0.1, so we can reduce it, otherwise the sine wave would collapse. And I'll give it on information of the downward mobility. So let's see how it looks like. So this is Mexico, guys. So basically what you're seeing is an XY axis where the sine wave adding random numbers to the equations plus the parameters that are added from this country in particular, Mexico, generates this sort of wave form. If we get a closer look to it, you can see all those data points. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of data points randomly created, but they form a distinguished view of, for Mexico. So if we move to another country, let's say Uruguay, it will show something like that. Also, I use the colors of the flag. But the most interesting here is that when I saw this and I was playing around to see if I can maximize the differences between one model to another, I realized that we can create some sort of animation. If I use all of those pictures as frames as in an animation, so we can see how open societies are and how close society is through animation when we paste all of those. So this is how it would look like. This some sort of heart-beating, breathable artifact. What it's showing is countries who are really open and countries who are really closed. So the more is open is the artifact, means the countries like Uruguay, who has higher upward social mobility and lower downward social mobility. But when we see the animation collapsing, are those countries who are who has lower upward social mobility and higher downward social mobility. So let's move on to the second case study. This one is a little bit more complicated, and it took us a little bit more of time. But I'm going to break it down for you. So first, the objective was to create a 3D motion design of comparative empirical data on social mobility across time and between countries. So we have 4 elements here: social class structure of parents, social class structures of responders, time, and space. So that's a lot of information that normally is really difficult to show. We want also to test the pedagogical effectiveness of this artifact, but we're not ready yet. We're still in a proof of concept phase. We don't have a prototype. And we're going to keep using social mobility data from the ISP survey. We're going to use data from Australia case. Why? Because it starts with A. So, yeah. Seriously, because the difference between the different generations in Australia, we expect it to be higher. That's what Ildefonso Marquez just leaned us to do. We consider this an art and science collaboration because we joined Teresa Rofer, who is an amazing 3D motion artist and designer, to the team. She accepted to do the job with the money that I got. So I'm really grateful and thankful that she accepted the challenge. So basically, to get some context, the visualization of social mobility has been a big challenge since the beginning, because we have many dimensions at the same time. We have the margins, which is the social structure for parents and sons, and we also have the ratios, and we have the change of the ratio. So this is from The Constant Flux, which is one of the most famous social mobility books ever published by Erickson and Goldthorpe. In this table, you can see a lot of information already. Taking into account these are odd ratios, people who are coming from the first class and are ending up in the first class, let's call it 1, and people coming from the first class and they experience a downward social mobility going to the 7th class, those people are 8 times less likely. Let's say, so you have 8 times more likelihood to end up in the same social class as your parents if you were born in the first class than ending up in the 7th class. Also, just because of the size of the height and width, it provides information about the margins. So if you focus on the 6th class, which is the skilled manual workers, the traditional working class, working in factories, we see that on the sons class structures, the width is smaller than the height. That means that the social class has changed. The same in the first class. Obviously, in the social structure of the sons, there is wider than higher, because the higher information is from the father's social class structure. So you get the point. This is important because I want you to understand that the diagonal, which is the most colored one, is the one that is most important in social mobility. So the data that we have is that table, that same table, with in blue are people experiencing upward social mobility. We're using the Erickson, Goldthorpe, and Portocarrero class scheme and of 7 classes. And in red, you have people experiencing downward social mobility. And we have three generations here: silent generations, boom generations, or boomer generations, and Generation X. Why we have taken these generations? Because are more easily identified by general public than if I create ad hoc cohorts that people doesn't relate to. So we wanted to create these three generation, even though we sacrifice sample size in our way. So we take this, and I started working on some design. So at the beginning, I thought that, well, we can create a 3D modeling, creating each class structure as it would be like 3 different blocks, but then create problems of how I would draw the people who are coming from different classes. We could create some sort of animation like this. My colleague and friend, Christian Segura, he's an expert doing that kind of visualizations. But I thought that there was a lot of problems, so I keep iterating until I was reaching a point where I got something, especially because I just focus on the diagonal, what we call the social reproduction. People coming from the same social class, ending up from the same social class. So with this design, I started making an idea of how we can represent this. So we take the margins, which is basically the social structure of interviewers and the parents, and we launch it into a point of vanishing point at the end of it. We can create those dots that correspond to the size of each social class, which is the lower white dots. Then we add another layer, which is the parents' social class. And this is how it gets interesting. How I would represent social reproduction, which is the diagonal. Well, I'm going to start representing the diagonal, which is one of the most important information points on social mobility. And I create yellow dots. The width of those yellow dots depends of what I found in my table. So I expect the social reproduction of the first class, the service class, to be one of the thickest, of the thickest of those tubes or jets or whatever. So would you ask me then, how would you represent people coming from other social classes? So what we created is a helicoidal 90 degrees axis, would represent the people coming from these lower social classes. So the last few of those jets, blue jets, are the ones in the lowest social classes, and we expect them to be less thick. Okay, so when we move on to other social classes, then people experience downward social mobility will come up, as in this class, people coming from the class 1 ending up in the class 2, and then in the following class, we have 2 on the other side, and so on and so forth. I guess that you get the idea. So what we wanted to do is just, what about if we create the saturated model for one country and the saturated model to another country, and we compare them all together? That was my idea, and again, with that idea to Teresa Refer, which is the expert on 3D motion design. So she got the concept, and she started making some first renders and iterations. So this is the first iteration that she created, pretty much what I wanted. The width of each of those jets depends on the data of the table, but just because the point of view is so low, we couldn't see the downward social mobility rates at the other side. So I asked her if she could raise the point of view and make a panel around that figure. So what I want you to focus now is on the yellow jets, okay, the yellow columns, because those are the social reproduction. We're going to see the camera moving around this render, and we're going to see changes from one generation to the following generation and then back. So we're going to the silent generations, those who were born in 1928 to 1944, the boomer generation, 1945 to 64, and the Generation X, 65 to 1980, okay? So let's go. Focus on the yellow columns. You will see that there is a lot of social reproduction in the middle. With the boomers, the social reproduction may be a little bit less and more concentrated in the back. And now when we change to the Generation X, we will see less social reproduction in the lower classes. Again, from Generation X to boomers generation. We're going to see the social reproduction growing at the bottom with the lower classes. I see you noting that. Got you. And then from boomers to the silent generation that concentrate the social reproduction in the middle classes. We can focus also in the other downward and upwardly social mobility movements. Probably there are too many social classes here. We need to reduce that. And also there are some classes with 0 cases, because this class in particular, I didn't explain it because I had no time, but that class in particular are the agricultural small owners, so people who working in the countryside, but their own like a small property. Okay, so future steps. What I want to do, well, regarding the STRAT-ART generative, I want to augment the number of countries. We only have 22 because we're basing we're relying on the available data that we have. I want to use different chords as well and see the patterns for each country. That would be fun. And also, I want to use different indicators. I'm working already with Pablo Dale to include other indicators, to include other functions and generative art engines, that there is a possibility, and also open up the code within the consortium to let other people bring in the data and see what we can work with it. Regarding STRAT-ART 3D, well, the most important thing is to take the functionality, the functional purpose of it. I'm finishing, Frank. I've got the final. Thank you. So the functionality would require to make a test to see if students can understand social mobility better with this than the state-of-the-art methods. So it's a little bit complicated. That's why in the next few days, in the next 2 days, I'm going to go to the data visualization lab at the University of Amsterdam here to see what can we work with this. I would like to obviously increase the number of animations to compare countries, but also to compare genders, or include a new generation, which is the millennial generations, that probably I expected to do it further, to produce an educational video about social mobility, because I think that it's worth it to embed this video in that kind of educational content. And also a more let's say, like difficult task is creating an OpenGL application where people can add their nested table data set and use this tool to see if they can see all those differences between odds ratios and so on and so forth. So as a final slide, we're going to talk about the expected impacts. Obviously, I want to keep increasing awareness in general public through maybe joining art and science initiative and exhibitions. We are already applied in some open calls about it. Science fairs. We're talking and in collaboration with the Arts and Science Society, depending on the European Commission, doing some media coverage. I want to improve the understanding of the students too. So use it as a real tool for students to understand the complexity of social mobility. Improve some renders, reduce EGP class schema to make it easier to understand. And regarding the dissemination and exploitations, well, we want to publish the result on journals. We're wanted to publish in the Leonardo Journal, which is an art and science specialized scientific journals, edited by MIT Press. There is also the Journal of Science Communication. And finally, we're in conversation with the Patent and Copyright Office of the University of Sevilla to see if this has an opportunity to do that. If not, it's just okay. So and I had a lot of fun with it. So thank you very much for your attention.